22 years old, engaged, happy. That's what Gabby Petito's life looks like on video. A white van, national parks, sunsets in Utah. But on August 12th, 2021, a police body camera in Moab captures a different picture. Gabby is sobbing, and her fiancé's face is covered in fresh scratches. The officers let them both go. 2 weeks later, Gabby will be found dead near Spread Creek in Wyoming. Her fiancé will drive her van back home, refuse to talk, and vanish. This is a story about the people who had a chance to stop what happened, and about why they didn't. Gabrielle Petito, Gabby, as everyone calls her, was born on March 19, 1999, in Blue Point, a quiet town on the south shore of Long Island, New York. The eldest of 6 children, she got used to being the center of attention and care from an early age. After her parents' divorce, she lives with her mom, Nicole Schmidt, and her stepfather, but stays close with her dad, Joseph Petito. At Bayport Blue Point High School, she meets Brian Christopher Laundrie. He would later tell friends that he spotted her near a store, pulled over, and struck up a conversation, and that it was love at first sight. They start dating in March 2019, when Gabby is almost 20 and Brian is 21. Less than 9 months later, she moves in with him in Florida, into his parents' house in Northport. In July 2020, Brian proposes. But by the summer of 2021, the wedding plans are either postponed or called off entirely. Friends notice the relationship has changed. Brian becomes withdrawn and controlling. He criticizes her work, calls the people around her losers, and feels like he's been pushed to the background. Gabby increasingly finds herself torn between wanting to save the relationship and sensing that something inside it is breaking. On July 2nd, 2021, the couple leaves Blue Point in a white 2012 Ford Transit, a converted van registered in Gabby's name. The plan is ambitious: 4 months, dozens of national parks, fully documenting the trip for YouTube and Instagram. The channel is called Nomadic Static. Gabby dreams of becoming a travel blogger, showing the beauty of life on the road. Over the entire trip, she will publish just one video, an 8-minute clip called Beginning Our Van Life Journey, released on August 19th. It will be watched more than 5 million times. By the time most viewers hit play, Gabby will already be dead. But behind the scenes of her YouTube channel, a very different story is unfolding. On August 12th, 2021, in the town of Moab, Utah, a random bystander dials 911. He tells the dispatcher that he just saw a man hitting a woman near a white van. Within minutes, a police patrol spots the van on the road and pulls it over. Behind the wheel is Brian Laundrie. In the passenger seat is Gabby Petito. She's crying. Officer Eric Robbins activates his body camera. The footage, which will later make its way around the world, captures every detail. There are fresh scratches on Brian's face and arm. Marks from physical contact are also visible on Gabby's hands and neck. Gabby admits she hit Brian first, but she adds, he grabbed her by the face. Both insist they love each other. Both beg the officers not to press charges. Brian appears calm, Gabby does not. Officer Robbins makes a decision. He classifies the incident not as a domestic crime, but as a mental health crisis. In his report, he will write that the situation did not rise to the level of assault. The police designate Gabby as the primary aggressor, despite the fact that the witness who called in described the exact opposite. The couple is separated for one night. Brian is taken to a hotel. Gabby is left in the van. The next morning, they're back together. No charges, no investigation, no consequences. Under Utah state law, when signs of domestic violence are present, police are required to open a case, but that doesn't happen. 2 weeks later, Gabby Petito will be dead. While the police reports settle into the Moab archives, the trip continues. But 5 days later, on August 17th, Brian Laundrie buys a plane ticket from Salt Lake City to Tampa. He flies halfway across the country, leaving Gabby alone in the van in the middle of Utah. The official explanation will come later from his family's lawyer. Brian returned to close a storage unit, a rental locker where the couple kept their belongings. Supposedly, this would save money if they decided to extend the trip. The explanation raises questions. You can close a storage unit over the phone. A round-trip flight costs more than a month's rent on a locker. And most importantly, The trip happened 5 days after the police incident, when Gabby was sobbing in front of the camera, and Brian had already been documented as a participant in a physical altercation. What exactly Brian did in Florida for nearly a week remains unknown. The lawyer confirms the flight, but reveals no details. Investigators will later be unable to determine whether Brian met with anyone, retrieved anything from storage, or had another purpose entirely. Gabby stays behind, alone. On August 19th, she uploads the YouTube video that the couple had worked on together. Beginning our van life journey. 8 minutes of beautiful drone footage, desert, mountains, the van silhouetted against a sunset. A happy couple on screen, a beautiful life on wheels. On August 23rd, Brian returns on a flight to Salt Lake City. They reunite. 2 days later, Gabby will send her mom her last normal message. On August 25th, Gabby updates her Instagram for the last time. That same day, she texts normally with her mom. Then, silence. The next day, nothing. And on August 27th, the couple shows up at Mary Piglet's, a small Mexican restaurant in Jackson, Wyoming, at the foot of the Teton Mountains. What happens inside is noticed by several patrons. Witness Nina Angelo, vacationing with her boyfriend, describes the scene. Brian Laundrie is yelling at the restaurant staff. He walks out and comes back in 4 times within 5 minutes. His behavior is aggressive. Gabby is crying and apologizing to the staff for her fiancé's behavior. Angelo will later say she was frightened by what she saw. The restaurant manager will confirm the incident took place and that the establishment passed the information to the FBI. That same day, a strange message arrives on Gabby's mom's phone from Gabby's number. "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Stan is the name of Gabby's grandfather, but she never called him by his first name. Her mother doesn't immediately realize something is off about the text. Later, Nicole Schmidt will say the message was suspicious, but at the time, she didn't think much of it. According to the FBI's findings, it is on approximately this day, August 27, 2021, that Gabby Petito dies. Location: the dispersed camping zone at Spread Creek in Bridger-Teton National Forest, Wyoming. The autopsy, conducted about 6 weeks later, will determine the cause: manual strangulation and blunt force injuries to the head and neck. What exactly happened between the restaurant and Spread Creek remains unknown. The only person who knows the answer will never give testimony again. That person, Brian Laundrie, surfaces on the side of a road in Grand Teton National Park 2 days after Gabby's death. On August 29th, around 5:30 in the evening, Miranda Baker and her boyfriend are driving past the Colter Bay area when they see a young man hitchhiking. He walks up to the car, introduces himself as Brian, and offers $200 for a 10-mile ride. He says he's been camping alone by the Snake River for several days. His girlfriend, he claims, stayed behind in the van and is working on their social media page. Baker agrees to give him a ride. In the car, Brian acts strangely. He's nervous. When Baker mentions they're heading to Jackson, Brian abruptly changes his tone and asks to be let out right here, at the Jackson Lake Dam. At 6:09 p.m., he jumps out of the car, mutters, "I'll find another ride," and walks away. Baker will remember it as a very odd encounter. Later, when Laundrie's photo appears across every news broadcast, she will recognize him instantly. A few minutes after Baker drops him off, Brian is picked up by another woman, Norma Jean Jalovec, a seasonal resident of Wyoming. She picks him up around 6:15 at the dam and drives him to the Spread Creek area, the very spot where just a few hundred yards from the white van, Gabby's body lies. Brian tells Jalovec the same thing he told Baker. His girlfriend is waiting for him in the van. In reality, his girlfriend has been dead for at least 2 days. But Brian returns to the van, gets behind the wheel, and begins the drive to Florida. As the white van moves southeast across the country, messages keep going out from Gabby Petito's phone. On August 30th, her mother Nicole Schmidt receives a text. "No service in Yosemite." Gabby is supposedly writing from Yosemite National Park in California, where there's no cell reception. At first glance, it's a reasonable explanation for the silence. But there's a problem. Yosemite is in California, and the van at that point is moving through the southern states toward Florida. 2 days later, it will be in Northport, 3,000 miles from Yosemite. Nicole Schmidt won't realize this right away. But even before that, She's already unsettled by the August 27th message about Stan. Later, when the facts come together, the mother will say unequivocally, "My daughter didn't write that. I know it." According to the FBI's findings, Brian Laundrie deliberately sent messages from Gabby's phone to create the illusion she was still alive and to buy himself time. Time for what? That's a question the FBI will also raise. At the same time, Laundrie is using Gabby's bank card. From August 30th through September 1st, he makes purchases and cash withdrawals totaling more than $1,000. This will become the basis for the only criminal charge ever filed in this case: bank fraud using another person's financial instruments, a federal offense under Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 1029, not for Gabby's death, not for the cover-up, for using her bank card. On September 1st, Brian Laundrie parks the van at his parents' house in Northport. He arrived alone. Gabby is not in the van. Nobody asks any questions. Brian returns to his parents' house and acts as if nothing happened. Christopher and Roberta Laundrie don't ask where Gabby is. They don't call her parents. They don't contact the police. Instead, the family hires attorney Stephen Bertolino. From this point on, any communication with the outside world goes exclusively through him. On September 6th, 5 days after Brian's return, the Laundrie family goes camping at Fort DeSoto on the Gulf Coast. Brian, his mother, and his father spend 3 days in tents by the water. A typical family getaway. This trip will come to light later and spark a storm of questions. Why does the family go out into nature when their son's fiancée is nowhere to be found? What are they discussing on the shore? From sworn testimony given in 2023, it will emerge that as early as August 29th, Brian called his father and, in Christopher Laundrie's words, told him in a very agitated state that Gabby is gone. The father claims he tried to calm him down and immediately dialed the number of a lawyer he knew. Both parents will later state they didn't know the details and didn't suspect a crime, but the lawsuit filed by Gabby's family paints a different picture. According to the plaintiffs, the Laundries and their attorney already knew Gabby was dead, yet publicly expressed hope that she'd be found. For 10 days, from the moment Brian returned until the missing person report was filed, the Laundrie family never once contacted Gabby's family. Nicole Schmidt texts and calls. On the other end, silence. That silence breaks on September 11th, 2021, when Gabby's family finally files a missing person report with the Suffolk County Police in New York. The last confirmed contact with Gabby was August 25th, 17 days earlier. Everything that came from her phone after that date, her mother considers a forgery. That same day, Northport police come to the Laundrie home. Brian stands behind the door and invokes the Fifth Amendment, the right not to testify against oneself. He doesn't say a single word. Attorney Bertolino makes an official statement. The family will not be providing any testimony. The van, the only piece of physical evidence, sits in the Laundrie's driveway. The police don't yet have grounds for a search. The case instantly goes beyond local news. A van life blogger, a white van, a silent fiancé. The story hits CNN, NBC, ABC, Fox. But the main engine isn't television. It's social media. Dozens of accounts dedicated to the investigation pop up on TikTok. Users analyze Gabby's posts, reconstruct the route using geotags, search for gas station cameras. The Moab police body camera footage, previously unknown to anyone, becomes publicly available and racks up tens of millions of views within days. The whole world watches a crying Gabby sitting in front of officers who label her the aggressor. But even before the police can react, the fiancé disappears. On September 13th or 14th, the exact date remains a matter of dispute to this day. Brian Laundrie leaves the house. The family's attorney initially gives the date as the 14th, then corrects it to the 13th. The parents will later say that Brian told them he was going for a hike in the Carlton Reserve, 25,000 acres of swamps, dense undergrowth, waterways, and impassable terrain southeast of Northport. He grabs a backpack and walks out. The next day, September 15th, Northport police declare Brian Laundrie a person of interest in the disappearance of Gabby Petito. Not a suspect, a person of interest. But there's nobody to declare it to. Brian is gone. The parents don't raise the alarm. That same day, September 15th, they discover Brian's car at the entrance to the reserve, bring it home, and continue to stay silent. 2 more days pass. Only on September 17th, a Friday, do Christopher and Roberta Laundrie finally call the police. "We haven't seen Brian for several days," they say, "and we're concerned about his well-being." By this point, 3 to 4 days have passed since Brian walked out. On September 18th, a massive search operation begins. More than 50 people, FBI agents, Northport police, search specialists, enter the Carlton Reserve. The reserve is terrain that's difficult to navigate even with training. Flooded trails, dense underbrush, alligators, deep channels. Search drones scan the area from the air, boats comb the canals, no results. The question the entire country is asking is simple. How did the police let the only suspect walk away? The answer to that question is still to come. Meanwhile, on September 19th, on the other side of the country, in Wyoming, what everyone feared comes to pass. An FBI search team is working near Spread Creek, a remote area, gravel roads, scattered tent sites, no electricity, no cell service. This is exactly where witness Jessica Schultz had seen a white van from August 26th through the 29th. The van was parked in an unauthorized spot, with no signs of camping, no traces of life around it. Then it vanished. Now, 3 weeks later, human remains are discovered at this location. On September 21st, they are preliminarily identified as those of Gabby Petito. Manner of death, homicide. The following day, September 22nd, a federal court in the District of Wyoming issues an arrest warrant for Brian Laundrie, but not yet for a crime against Gabby. The evidentiary case is still being built. The warrant is for bank card fraud. Laundrie used Gabby's debit card after her death. The full answer on the cause of death arrives on October 12th. Teton County Coroner Dr. Brent Blue holds a press conference. Cause of death, manual strangulation. Blunt force injuries to the head and neck are also documented. In the coroner's assessment, the body had been exposed to the open air for 3 to 4 weeks, consistent with the estimated date of death, August 27th. Under Wyoming state law, autopsy details and photographs are not subject to public disclosure, but what has been announced is enough. Gabby Petito didn't go missing. She died at the hands of another person. That other person, Brian Laundrie, is still not found. The search operation in the Carlton Reserve is now in its 4th week. Dozens of people enter the swamps of southern Florida every day. Flooded trails, alligators, thick vegetation that even drones can't penetrate. Still no results. On October 5th, Brian's sister Cassie Laundrie appears on television. She is the only family member to publicly address her brother. Cassie asks him to turn himself in. She also reveals that Brian was present at the family camping trip to Fort DeSoto in early September, a detail the parents had not previously disclosed. On October 7th, Brian's father, Christopher Laundrie, joins the search team and helps navigate the reserve, pointing out trails his son knew and used. On October 20th, the 33rd day of the search, a discovery is made. In the Myakkahatchee Creek Park area, adjacent to the Carlton Reserve, about 2 to 3 miles from the entrance, a search team finds human remains. Nearby, a backpack, a notebook, and a revolver. The following day, October 21st, the FBI confirms. Dental record comparison points conclusively to the remains belonging to Brian Laundrie. On November 23rd, the medical examiner of Sarasota County publishes the findings, cause of death, a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The notebook found next to Laundrie's body becomes the only direct evidence of what happened at Spread Creek. On January 21st, 2022, FBI Denver releases its final report on the Gabby Petito case and discloses the contents of the writings. The notebook contains a written confession. Laundrie writes, "I ended her life." He then lays out his version of events. According to him, Gabby fell into water and suffered a serious injury. He claims he ended her suffering out of mercy. "I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted." Experts immediately cast doubt on this version. The coroner's findings leave no room for such an interpretation. The nature of the injuries is inconsistent with a fall into water. The mercy narrative looks like an attempt to reframe what happened, but verifying or disproving his words is no longer possible. Laundrie is dead, and there are no other witnesses. At the end of his writings, Laundrie explains his decision to take his own life. He claims he did it not out of fear of punishment, but because he cannot live without Gabby, the very same Gabby he strangled to death. The FBI concludes Brian Laundrie is the sole individual responsible for the death of Gabby Petito. No other suspects have been identified. All investigative activities are complete. The case is closed. No trial, no verdict, no cross-examination, no opportunity to question the person who knows the answers. Gabby Petito's family receives a conclusion, but not justice. But after the case is closed, another process begins: the reckoning. An independent review of the Moab police response uncovers a chain of serious errors. The reviewers determine the officers violated the very law they were obligated to enforce. Instead of investigating, they classified the situation as a mental health crisis and limited their response to separating the couple for one night. The reviewers also conclude that Gabby was, in all likelihood, a long-term victim of domestic control. The face grab she described to the officers is characterized by experts as an extremely personal, aggressive, and controlling act. But the officer didn't even investigate the claim. Gabby's family files a lawsuit against the Moab police for $50 million. Their position is straightforward. If the officers had done their job on August 12th, Gabby would be alive. The judge dismisses the suit, citing the state's governmental immunity law, which shields public officials from lawsuits of this kind. The family announces its intention to appeal. A separate thread running through the case is a letter found in Laundrie's backpack. On the envelope it reads, "Burn after reading." The letter was written by his mother, Roberta. In it, she offers her son help, including a shovel and garbage bags if he ever needs to get rid of a body. Roberta claims she wrote the letter long before the trip, that it was a joke inspired by a book of the same name that Gabby had given Brian. The court, however, admits the letter as evidence in the civil proceedings. That civil case is not the only one. Gabby's family files a separate lawsuit against Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, as well as their attorney Stephen Bertolino, for intentional infliction of emotional distress. The suit alleges the Laundrie family knew Gabby was dead, and not only stayed silent, but allowed others to keep hoping she'd be found. In February 2024, the parties reach a confidential settlement. The terms are not disclosed. The Petito family states they agreed, reluctantly, to avoid further costs and a prolonged conflict. After the settlement, Gabby's parents established the Gabby Petito Foundation, an organization supporting victims of domestic control and families of missing persons. In February 2025, Netflix releases the documentary American Murder, Gabby Petito, in which Gabby's words are heard in the first person, from videos she recorded herself. The case also sparks a broad conversation about how the media covers disappearances. Critics point to missing white woman syndrome, a phenomenon where the disappearances of young white women receive a disproportionate amount of media attention. The family of Jelani Day, a black graduate student found dead in Illinois during the same period, directly points to the contrast in coverage. The Gabby Petito case is officially closed, but the key questions remain unanswered. What exactly the Laundrie parents knew, and when? Why Brian flew to Florida in mid-August, when the burn after reading letter was actually written? And most importantly, what happened between the Mary Piglet's restaurant and the Spread Creek area on the evening of August 27, 2021? The only person who could answer took those answers with him into the swamps of Carlton. On the 14th of July, 2019, police in Utica, New York, learn about a violent crime not from witnesses or neighbors, but from posts on Discord and Instagram. 17-year-old Bianca Devins, an online influencer with tens of thousands of followers, is found on a dead-end street beneath a green tarp. The person who was with her that night didn't try to run. He photographed what he had done and posted the images online, in the very space where Bianca had built her life. The photos spread across social media faster than anyone could take them down. How did one of her followers become her greatest threat? And why couldn't the platforms that gave her a voice protect her? Utica, New York, a small city in the northeastern United States where not much happens. Bianca Michelle Devins was born here on the 2nd of October, 2001. She lives with her mother, Kim, her stepfather, and her younger sister, Olivia. Her relationship with her biological father ended long ago. At 16, doctors diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder. That means sharp mood swings, unstable self-image, a feeling that you can never truly be sure of yourself. But there's one place where Bianca feels free: the internet. The online world becomes a space where she can be whoever she wants. Under the handle at eskti on Instagram, she posts photos in the e-girl style: bright hair, dramatic makeup, emo aesthetics inspired by anime and manga. Her audience grows fast. By the summer of 2019, she already has more than 40,000 followers. She's active on multiple platforms at once: Discord, Tumblr, even 4chan. Among her male followers, a particular circle forms around her, so-called orbiters. These are people who follow her online, like her posts, leave comments, but never truly get close. Bianca treats them with remarkable openness and patience, sometimes too much of it. She chats, responds to messages, keeps up the contact. In the summer of 2019, a new chapter opens before her. She's preparing to enroll at the local college, Mohawk Valley Community College, to study psychology. Bianca wants to help teenagers dealing with mental health disorders, a subject she knows not from textbooks, but from her own life. She's 17, and everything is just beginning. One of those who eventually finds Bianca's account is 21-year-old Brandon Andrew Clark. But before he enters her life, it's worth understanding where he came from. Clark was born on the 6th of October, 1997. His childhood is marked by a trauma that would largely define his future. In 2010, when Brandon is 12, his father, Jason Clark, flies into a rage over suspicions that his wife is being unfaithful. He locks himself in an apartment with her and holds her at knife point with a kitchen knife for 10 hours. When police finally arrive, Jason is pressing the blade against his wife's throat, demanding that no one come closer. He's arrested and sent to prison. Shortly after, Brandon's mother is arrested on a separate charge. The boy ends up in foster care. According to those who knew him later, Clark comes across as a charming, sociable person. A good guy, even his mother says. But those who look closer notice something else: a tendency toward obsessive behavior, a fixation on people he considers important to him. On Instagram, under the handle at YesJuliet, Clark leads an ordinary life: selfies, gym photos, metal music. He has about 3,000 followers. For now, Clark is just another user scrolling through his feed. Around April of 2019, that feed leads him to Bianca's profile. Clark starts following her account, liking posts, sending messages. The online interactions quickly evolve into a real-life connection, and they meet in person. For a short time, a relationship develops between them. But for Bianca, it doesn't mean anything serious. She's 17, college is a few months away, and she doesn't want to get attached. Clark sees the situation completely differently. He keeps calling himself her boyfriend, even though Bianca tells him directly they're not together. They don't have an exclusive relationship. For her, it's a clear boundary. For him, it's unbearable humiliation. Bianca's family, meanwhile, doesn't see Clark as a threat. Her mother, Kim, views him as a pleasant young man, part of her daughter's social circle. Her sister, Olivia, would later call him a friend of the family. No one notices the cracks behind the charming facade. Clark visits their home, interacts with the family, seems harmless. But something is building inside him that he can't control. The gap between how Bianca defines their connection and how Clark sees it grows wider with every week. She sees him as one of many people in her orbit. He sees himself as the only one who has any claim to her. This difference in perception is not just a misunderstanding, and it's growing in silence, invisible to everyone around them. Everything accelerates in early July. In the days before the 13th, Clark opens Google on his phone and types in searches that leave no room for doubt. Searches related to inflicting fatal harm on a person. These searches would later become one of the key pieces of evidence. But for now, no one knows about them. Clark prepares methodically. He hides a long knife with a black handle under the driver's seat of his car. He mounts a camera on the dashboard vent, the lens pointed at the interior. Shortly before the trip, he posts a photo from the car on Instagram with the caption, "Here comes hell. It's redemption, right?" On the evening of the 13th of July, Bianca, Clark, and their mutual acquaintance Alex, a guy from Bianca's circle, get in the car and drive to New York City for a concert by Canadian-American singer Nicole Dollanganger in the Queens area. They arrive around 7:30 in the evening. Bianca had been worried beforehand. In Discord messages, she mentioned that Clark might get jealous of Alex. Her concerns turn out to be spot on. At the concert, Bianca takes Alex's hand. Then she kisses him. Clark sees it. He's enraged, but for now he holds back. After 10 in the evening, they leave the venue and get back in the car. On the way back, Alex is dropped off. Now it's just Clark and Bianca in the car. Ahead of them, several hours of driving to Utica. The knife is under the seat. The camera is aimed inside. Bianca falls asleep in the back seat, not knowing that the person next to her has already made his decision. The car pulls into Utica deep in the night. Instead of driving Bianca home, Clark turns onto a quiet dead-end street nearby. He cuts the engine and wakes Bianca. A conversation starts about what happened at the concert, about the kiss with Alex. The camera on the dashboard records everything. Later, describing the video footage, a police lieutenant will explain that Bianca apologizes. She calmly explains, "There is no exclusive relationship between her and Clark. They are not together." That's not something Clark is willing to accept. The conflict escalates. At some point, he hits her. Bianca says she's leaving, threatens to get out of the car. Those are the last words she manages to say. Clark pulls the knife from under the seat and inflicts a fatal wound to her neck. It all happens in a dark car on an empty street in a small town, America. No one sees or hears anything. The camera captures the final minutes. This recording will later become part of the evidence, though it's never shown in court because Clark pleads guilty before the trial begins. Bianca Devins was 17 years old. In just a few weeks, she was supposed to start college. But Clark doesn't call for help. He doesn't call the police. He doesn't try to flee. What he does next transforms this case from a crime into something that neither law enforcement nor tech companies are prepared for. He spreads a green tarp on the ground and places Bianca's body on it. Then he lies down next to her and takes out his phone. He takes a selfie. At 6:03 in the morning on the 14th of July, he opens Bianca's Discord server, the same one where she chatted with her followers, and posts a photograph of her body. The caption reads, "Sorry fuckers, you're gonna have to find somebody else to orbit." The word orbit is a direct reference to what her male followers were called. Then Clark uploads the images to Instagram. On Snapchat, another photo appears, his left hand covered in blood, the outline of a body visible beneath the tarp, with the caption, "I'm sorry, Bianca." The photos begin circulating across Discord channels. Users who see the posts react instantly, but not with likes. They call the police. By 7 in the morning, Utica police receive the first calls. The source of the information isn't neighbors, random witnesses, or relatives. These are people from the internet, often hundreds of miles from the scene. At 7:20, the 911 dispatch center in Oneida County logs multiple calls. A man has claimed on social media that he committed a violent crime and is threatening to harm himself. For the first time in local police history, a crime is uncovered not at the scene, but on the internet, in real time. Utica police act fast. Using cell phone data, they track Clark's location and head to Poe Street, that same dead end. Before 8 in the morning, officers find him lying on the ground next to a black SUV. When police approach, Clark attempts to harm himself. Paramedics provide emergency care and save his life. Nearby, under the green tarp, they discover Bianca's body. Clark is hospitalized and stabilized. 3 days later, on the 17th of July, he's formally charged, but not with what you might expect. The prosecution classifies the crime as second-degree murder, not first. This raises questions. The hidden knife, the Google searches, the camera in the car, everything points to premeditation. However, under New York state law, first-degree murder requires strictly defined qualifying factors. For example, a crime against a specific category of individuals or one committed for payment. The prosecution determines these factors don't apply. On the 29th of July, Clark appears in court and enters a plea of not guilty. His case begins moving through the judicial system. But outside the courtroom, another story is unfolding, one that neither the police nor investigators have the power to stop. Bianca's photos have already taken on a life of their own online, and no verdict can put them back. Those photos spread at a speed none of the platforms are ready for. Within hours of Clark's posting, the images escape Discord and surface on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. But the most powerful pull comes from 4chan, the anonymous forum where moderation in the conventional sense doesn't exist. Hundreds of posts on 4chan glorify Clark. Users call what happened another 4chan crime and turn the tragedy into a meme. Those who try to stop the spread, who ask people to stop sharing the images, find themselves in the minority. Their voices drown. On Instagram, the situation looks different, but no better. Users flood the platform with reports, demanding the photos be removed. The platform's response is staggering. The content is acceptable with a sensitive content warning. The photos aren't taken down. They remain on the platform for weeks. Every time one image is finally removed, a new one appears in its place, uploaded by a different account. It's like a game of whack-a-mole where moderation always loses. Criticism of Instagram intensifies from the media, advocacy groups, ordinary users. The platform where Bianca built her online life, ran her account, and connected with followers turns out to be the same space where her death becomes content for mass consumption. The tool that gave her a voice is now being used to turn her death into a spectacle. But the worst part for Bianca's family isn't the news articles or the forum discussions. The worst comes straight to their phones. Anonymous users begin sending photos of Bianca's body directly to family members' private messages. Not randomly, not in a general stream, but deliberately, personally, calculated for maximum pain. Bianca's stepfather suffers the most. He talks about constant flashbacks, images that won't let go. In October, when Bianca's birthday comes around, someone sends him a photo of her body with a party hat digitally added on top. This isn't just cruelty, it's systematic harassment. Her younger sister Olivia sees these images every time she closes her eyes before sleep. She's forced to delete all her social media accounts, the only way to stop the flood. But even after that, the photos keep finding their way to her. By the time of Clark's trial, Olivia has already turned 17. Mother Kim Devins will say later, "So many people were hurt by these photos. They have scars for life. They cannot erase that image from their minds." An expert invited to contribute to the CBS documentary 48 Hours, dedicated to Bianca's case, gives what's happening a precise term: psychological terrorism. The family lost Bianca once, that night on the dead-end street. But the internet forced them to lose her again and again, every single day. While the family battles the consequences online, the case moves through the judicial system. On the 10th of February 2020, 7 months after his first court appearance, Brandon Clark changes his position. He appears in Oneida County Court and pleads guilty to second-degree murder. The case seems to be approaching its conclusion. But in the summer of that same year, an unexpected turn occurs. Instead of showing up for sentencing, Clark files a motion with the court. He wants to withdraw his guilty plea. His argument? His attorney provided inadequate legal representation. Clark claims he didn't fully understand the consequences of his decision, that his choice was made under pressure. He asks the court to appoint a new attorney and start the process over. On the 14th of October, 2020, Judge Michael Dwyer holds a special hearing. Both sides present their arguments. For Bianca's family, this is agonizing. The possibility that the case might restart, that they'll have to endure a full trial with evidence, witnesses, and public examination of every detail. But Judge Dwyer issues an unequivocal ruling. The motion is denied. The guilty plea was voluntary, informed, and made with adequate representation. Clark cannot take his words back. The path to reconsideration is closed. All that remains is sentencing. On the 16th of March, 2021, 20 months after Bianca's death, sentencing day arrives in the Oneida County courtroom. The Devins family is given the right to address the court with victim impact statements about how the crime has changed their lives. The mother speaks first. Kim Devins speaks softly, but every word carries weight. "Life without Bianca will never be the same. Our family will never be whole again." She asks the court to ensure that Clark stays behind bars for the rest of his life, and she addresses the future parole board with a warning: show no leniency to a man who has shown not a shred of remorse. Then Olivia stands. She's 17, exactly the same age Bianca was. She speaks about the nightmares that never stop, about the inability to trust new people, about the constant fear that has become part of her everyday life. Other family members address the court as well: the grandfather, close friends. Kim says one final thing that becomes the closing statement for the family in this trial. "Today, we say his name for the last time." Judge Dwyer delivers the sentence: 25 years to life. This means Clark cannot petition for parole for at least a quarter of a century. He is sent to the Attica Correctional Facility, one of the most well-known prisons in New York State. In June of 2025, the state's appellate division will reject his appeal, upholding the sentence. The verdict closed the legal chapter of the case, but it didn't close the question this case posed to society. Kim Devins decides that her daughter's death must lead to real change. She launches a campaign to pass a law that would make distributing images of crime victims with the intent to humiliate or intimidate a criminal offense. She's joined by the family of Caroline Wimmer, another victim whose crime scene photos were circulated online. Together, the two families push for a bill to be introduced in the New York State Legislature. The law bears Bianca's name. Bianca's law criminalizes the publication of personal images of victims with the intent to cause harm to them or their families. A separate provision prohibits government employees from distributing crime scene photos, a problem that also surfaced in the Wimmer case. A violation is classified as a misdemeanor. In December of 2022, New York Governor Kathy Hochul signs the law. Kim takes one more step. She establishes a memorial scholarship fund in Bianca Michelle Devins' name. The fund supports those studying psychology and counseling, the very field Bianca wanted to pursue. She dreamed of helping teenagers struggling with mental health disorders. She knew the subject from personal experience. Now the fund continues what she never got the chance to start. A 17-year-old girl from Utica wanted her voice to be heard. It was heard, but nothing like the way she had imagined. In October 2008, a 38-year-old man named Johnny Altinger vanishes in Edmonton. His last known destination is a garage on the south side of the city, where he's headed for a date with a woman he met online. The woman doesn't exist. The garage is rented by an aspiring filmmaker named Mark Twitchell, a devoted fan of the TV series Dexter, who just weeks earlier shot a short film in that very same garage with an identical plot. On his laptop, police will find a 35-page document that opens with the words, "This is a story of my progression into becoming a serial criminal." Where does the screenplay end, and where does the confession begin? Mark Andrew Twitchell is born on July 4th, 1979, in Edmonton, the capital of the Canadian province of Alberta. From an early age, he's obsessed with pop culture, Star Wars, Transformers, superheroes. This isn't just a childhood hobby. As a teenager, he starts building costumes and props, and later wins competitions. In 2007, his Bumblebee costume from Transformers takes first place at Halloween Howler, an annual contest held by Edmonton's radio station, The Bear. Twitchell spends part of his youth in the American Midwest, but returns to Canada to pursue filmmaking. He enrolls in the radio and television program at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology and graduates in 1999. Twitchell dreams of becoming a director. He founds his own production company, Express Entertainment, and takes on an ambitious project, a fan film called Star Wars: Secrets of the Rebellion. The film comes out in 2007 and even features a cameo by Jeremy Bulloch, the actor who played Boba Fett in the original trilogy. Among Star Wars fans, it earns modest but notable recognition. Twitchell believes he's on the verge of a breakthrough. In January 2007, he marries for the second time to a woman named Jess, whom he met on a dating site. In 2008, they have a daughter. From the outside, everything looks like the start of a new chapter, a young father, a filmmaker with a growing portfolio. But behind this facade, a crisis is building. 5 months before the October events, Twitchell is fired from his job as a salesman at a security company. He hides this from his wife, pretending to leave for work every morning, while actually spending his time elsewhere. The marriage is falling apart. The couple sleeps in separate rooms and sees a marriage counselor. Their finances are crumbling. And in this downward spiral, Twitchell finds an anchor, the television series Dexter, the story of a charming serial criminal who leads a flawless double life. Twitchell doesn't watch it as a viewer. He watches it as someone who sees himself in the character. This identification with Dexter Morgan quickly extends beyond the screen. On his Facebook profile, Twitchell posts a status that will later become evidence. Mark has way too much in common with Dexter Morgan. In Facebook messages, he introduces himself using the television character's name. But so far, these are just words. In the summer of 2008, the actions begin. Twitchell rents a detached garage in South Edmonton. Officially, it's for shooting a new film. In August, he purchases a set of items, each of which will later become physical evidence: handcuffs, a 45-gallon steel drum, and a set of knives and game processing tools. Twitchell lines the walls of the garage with rolls of painter's plastic sheeting. It looks exactly like the room from Dexter, a sterile space, prepared so that not a single drop stays on any surface. In September 2008, Twitchell conducts a 3-day shoot for a short film called House of Cards, right there in that garage. The plot? A man creates a fake female profile on a dating site, lures men to a date at his hideout, and does away with them. The role of the criminal is played by Canadian actor Robert Barnsley from Toronto. Twitchell's usual crew is on set: camera operators, assistants. None of them see anything alarming. Barnsley will later tell reporters that Twitchell seemed like a completely normal, nice guy who just wanted to make a movie. Just weeks after the shoot wraps, Twitchell will return to that same garage. Only this time, there will be no camera, and the role Barnsley played, he will take on himself. On October 3, 2008, Gilles Tétrault gets in his car and drives to a date. He found a girl named Sheena on Plenty of Fish, a popular Canadian dating site. She sent him an address, a detached garage in South Edmonton. The location seems odd, but Tétrault doesn't think much of it. People meet in all kinds of places. He pulls up, walks to the half-open door, and steps inside. The garage is dark. In the next instant, someone grabs him from behind. Tétrault feels the jolt of a stun gun. Before him stands a man in a hockey mask. The attacker threatens him with a weapon and orders him to lie on the floor. Tétrault complies. His eyes are taped shut. But instead of freezing, instinct kicks in. Tétrault starts fighting back. He tries to break free, gets dragged back by his legs. The struggle continues. He lunges for the exit again and again. At one point, he manages to roll out from under the half-open garage door. Outside, he runs into a pair of passers-by and begs them for help. Tétrault is alive. He's standing on the sidewalk, breathing hard, covered in scrapes and stun gun burns. But he doesn't call the police. The reason he'll give later in court: he's embarrassed. Embarrassed to admit he drove to a date that turned out to be a trap. Embarrassed to explain why he went to a stranger's garage to meet a girl from the internet. Tétrault goes home and tries to forget what happened. 7 days later, another man will walk into that same garage, also for a date, also from Plenty of Fish. Only he won't manage to escape. On October 10, 2008, 38-year-old Johnny Altinger is getting ready for the evening. He's originally from White Rock in British Columbia, but has been living and working in Edmonton for several years. Altinger uses the same site, Plenty of Fish. He's been messaging a girl named Jen and arranges a meetup. She sends him an address. Before heading out, Altinger does something that may end up saving the investigation. He forwards that address to his friend Dale Smith, just in case, so that someone knows where he's going. Altinger reaches the garage and goes inside. A short while later, he calls Smith. "There's no woman here," he says. "There's some guy with a prop gun, says he's shooting a movie." Those words are the last thing Altinger's friends will ever hear from him. After the call, the line goes dead. Altinger never reaches out again, never shows up at home, never answers any messages. He vanishes. According to the investigation files and the prosecution's case, that evening, Twitchell attacks Altinger, striking him in the head with a copper pipe. Then he inflicts stab wounds. The garage, lined with plastic sheeting, becomes exactly what it was prepared to be. Twitchell tries to destroy the remains in the 45-gallon steel drum, but he can't burn the body completely. He then dismembers the remains, places them in garbage bags, loads them into his car, and drives away. The bags end up in a storm sewer on the northern outskirts of Edmonton, south of 130th Avenue. Twitchell returns to the garage and begins cleaning up. But before covering his tracks, he has another task to deal with: explaining Altinger's disappearance. To do this, Twitchell breaks into Altinger's apartment. He gains access to his email and starts sending messages from the victim's account. The logic is simple. If friends and coworkers believe Altinger left voluntarily, no one will come looking for him. On Monday morning, Dale Smith opens his inbox and sees a message from Altinger. "I met a wonderful woman named Jen. She invited me on vacation to Costa Rica. We'll be staying at her winter home. Won't be back before December 10th. I'll send my phone number later. Smith reads the email and immediately senses something is off. The writing style doesn't sound like his friend. Altinger never liked hot countries. If he were actually planning a trip, he would have asked Smith to look after his bicycle. They'd talked about that more than once. And most importantly, Altinger had only known this Jen for a few days. Flying off to Costa Rica with a stranger for 2 months? That's just not him. Smith shares his suspicions with other friends. Together, they decide to check. They go to Altinger's apartment. Inside, they find his passport, his suitcase, and his shaving kit. Everything is right where he left it. A man who supposedly flew abroad didn't take his passport or his belongings. On October 17th, Altinger's friends and relatives file a missing persons report with the Edmonton police. Dale Smith hands detectives the only solid lead, the address of the garage that Altinger sent him before the date. That message, a casual precaution by an ordinary person, becomes the thread that will unravel the entire investigation. Police check the address. The garage in South Edmonton is rented by an aspiring filmmaker named Mark Twitchell, a 29-year-old amateur director, no criminal record, not a single incident in his past. At first glance, just a creative guy shooting low-budget films in a rented space. Police invite him in for a conversation. Twitchell comes voluntarily, behaves eagerly, even enthusiastically. He readily talks about his film projects, about the House of Cards shoot, about his plans for the future. Detectives have no grounds for an arrest. Technically, they're looking at a witness, not a suspect. But during the conversation, Twitchell makes a mistake that changes everything. Answering a routine question about transportation, he casually mentions that he recently bought a red Mazda from some stranger for $40. That sentence triggers an immediate reaction. At this point, the police are actively searching for the missing Johnny Altinger's car, a red Mazda. The detective conducting the interview realizes the coincidence is too precise to be accidental. The information moves up the chain. When police inspect Twitchell's car, they find the license plates from Altinger's vehicle. They find the key to his Mazda. A man who walked in as a witness turns into the prime suspect in a matter of minutes. But there's no direct evidence yet of what exactly happened to Altinger. Twitchell keeps insisting on his story. He simply bought the car from a stranger on the cheap. Police need more, and Detective Bill Clark prepares for the next round. On October 20th, 2008, Clark calls Twitchell in for a second interview. This time, the conversation goes differently. Clark doesn't ask about films and projects. He lays out the facts, one by one. "I have no doubt whatsoever that you are involved in the disappearance of John Altinger," the detective says. He points to the inconsistencies in Twitchell's statements. Altinger's car in Twitchell's possession, the license plates in his vehicle, the key that couldn't have ended up there by accident. "You've got his car, his plates, his key, and this guy is missing," Clark says. Then he adds a phrase that becomes the defining moment of the interrogation. "You need to accept the fact that your life just changed." The interrogation goes on for hours. Clark shifts tactics. He brings up Twitchell's wife, his infant daughter. What will happen to his family? Twitchell starts crying. His chest heaves. He shakes his head. But even in that state, he doesn't confess. He continues to hold his ground. He bought the car from a stranger. He has nothing to do with Altinger's disappearance. Clark realizes a verbal confession isn't coming, but letting the suspect walk isn't an option either. Police put Twitchell under 24-hour surveillance. He feels the pressure. He moves out of the family home in St. Albert and goes to stay with his parents in North Edmonton. On October 23rd, Twitchell sends messages to friends and acquaintances with a warning. "Don't talk to the police. You have the right to remain silent. Use it." That message will also become evidence. Meanwhile, across town, Gilles Tétrault is sitting in front of his television, watching a press conference where police ask the public for help in the Altinger disappearance case. A hockey mask flashes on the screen. Tétrault freezes. He recognizes it. For 3 weeks, Tétrault kept silent. Now, seeing the mask on screen, he calls the police and tells them everything. On October 3rd, he was lured to that same garage through a fake profile on Plenty of Fish. A man in a hockey mask attacked him with a stun gun. He fought back, broke free, escaped. He didn't report it to the police at the time. Tétrault describes the attacker in detail, the layout of the garage, the method used to lure him. His testimony matches the circumstances of Altinger's disappearance down to the smallest detail. The same scheme, the same garage, the same method. A fake female profile, the promise of a date, a dark space, an ambush. For the investigation, this is the turning point. Tétrault's testimony proves that what happened to Altinger was no random conflict and no act of self-defense. It's a repeating pattern, planned, rehearsed, using the exact same playbook. Police now have a second witness, one who's alive and able to testify in court. At the same time, forensic investigators are working inside the garage. They treat the surfaces with luminol, a reagent that reveals traces of blood invisible to the naked eye. The result is staggering. More than 200 stains appear on the floor and walls. Lab DNA. Analysis confirms the blood belongs to Johnny Altinger. Inside the garage, they find a charred steel drum with evidence of an attempt to burn something inside. Altinger's blood is found on knives, cleavers, and saws seized from Twitchell's car. It's found on his keyboard. It's found in the trunk. The physical evidence forms a chain that no story about buying a car for $40 can explain. But the most important piece of evidence is still to come, stored on the hard drive of a laptop covered in Spider-Man stickers. Forensic specialists seize the laptop and begin examining it. On the hard drive, they discover a deleted file. Experts recover it, and the investigation is presented with a 35-page document titled SK Confessions. The abbreviation SK stands for Serial Criminal Confessions. The opening lines leave no room for ambiguity. This story is based on true events. The names and details have been slightly altered to protect the guilty. This is a story of my progression into becoming a serial criminal. The author of the document then describes his preparation step by step, purchasing the equipment, outfitting the garage, the failed first attempt, and the successful second one. Every item mentioned in the text has a physical counterpart among the evidence collected. Every detail matches what forensic investigators had already found in the garage, in the car, and in the trunk. On the same laptop, police find another file, a to-do list, kill room clean sweep, destroy wallet contents, return Addy of Vic. This is not a screenplay draft. This is a checklist of what needs to be done after the crime. On October 31st, 2008, Halloween night, the Edmonton Police Tactical Unit arrests Mark Twitchell. He's charged with first-degree murder. The question that will face the court: is this document a criminal's diary or merely a movie script? That question is taken up by a jury trial that begins in March 2011 in Edmonton. The prosecution builds its case on three pillars. The first is the SK Confessions document, which prosecutors present as a diary confession. The second is the physical evidence: blood in the garage, on the knives, in the trunk, on the keyboard, the charred drum, the to-do list. The third is the testimony of Gilles Tétrault, a living witness who survived an attack using the same method 1 week before Altinger's death. The prosecution's case is built with surgical precision. Twitchell first shot his short film, House of Cards, in the garage with actors, and then returned to that same garage and carried out the movie's script for real, taking on the role of the criminal himself. The defense calls a single witness, Twitchell himself. He admits two things: he wrote SK Confessions, and Altinger died at his hands. But he puts forward a self-defense theory. According to him, when Altinger arrived at the garage and realized there was no date, he flew into a rage and struck Twitchell first. I grabbed the pipe and kept hitting him in the head because he was pulling me toward him, the defendant states. At the same time, Twitchell offers yet another version: viral marketing. He claims he wanted to lure men in, scare them, and let them go so they'd tell the press how it really happened, generating publicity for his film. The prosecution methodically dismantles both versions. The equipment was purchased a month before the attack. The garage was fitted out and prepared in advance. The to-do list includes items about destroying evidence. The 35-page document describes exactly what happened, with details only the person who did it could know. A premeditated act cannot be self-defense. The jury retires to deliberate. It takes them 5 hours. On April 12, 2011, the jury returns to the courtroom and delivers its verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The judge hands down the sentence, Life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Twitchell is 31 years old. He won't even be eligible to apply for a review before 2033. Let's rewind. 9 months before the trial, in June 2010, Twitchell, having already been in custody for a year and a half, leads police to the location where he dumped the remains. A search team discovers them in a storm sewer on the northern outskirts of Edmonton. The medical examiner confirms the remains bear marks fully consistent with what is described in SK Confessions. The case draws attention far beyond Canada's borders. Major American and Canadian television networks produce segments about it. Edmonton Journal reporter Steve Lillibuen spends 3 years working on a book called The Devil's Cinema, which comes out in 2012 and wins the prestigious Arthur Ellis Award. An interesting detail: Twitchell himself initiates contact with the author from prison, calling to offer an interview. The filmmaker who never managed to build a career in the movies finally becomes the subject of a major story, just not the kind he dreamed of. In 2016, Gilles Tétreault publishes his own book, The One Who Got Away. But Twitchell himself doesn't go quiet. From prison, he carries on correspondence, gives interviews, and continues to tell his version of events. In March 2026, nearly 18 years after the crime, he appears before a parole board. Twitchell requests a temporary escorted release from prison, and at this hearing, for the first time, he speaks about his motive openly. "I began to wonder what it would be like to take someone's life," he tells the board. Curiosity planted the seed. He uses the same phrasing as in his SK Confessions, where he called it an exciting new hobby. At the same time, Twitchell tries to distance himself from the image that has been attached to him in the media. He claims the influence of Dexter on his actions was massively exaggerated during the trial. His plan, in his own words, was an illusion he clung to in order to keep going. The board hears him out and denies the release. The decision cites the need to consider the potential psychological impact on victims residing in the same city. Twitchell remains in prison. The case of Mark Twitchell remains one of the most striking examples of how the line between fiction and reality can be thinner than anyone cares to think. An aspiring filmmaker wrote a screenplay, shot a short film based on it with actors, and then returned to the same set and acted out the same script, this time without cameras, with a real victim and real consequences. The central question of this case has never been fully answered. Did Dexter create a new criminal, or did it simply give a name to something that was already growing inside? Gypsy Rose Blanchard couldn't walk, couldn't eat without a tube, couldn't live without a wheelchair. That's what her mother said. That's what doctors, neighbors, and charities believed. For more than 20 years, Dee Dee Blanchard built an image of a selfless mother caring for a severely ill daughter, and not a single person suspected that the entire illness was fabricated from start to finish. What happens when a victim, trapped inside someone else's lies, decides there's only one way out, and there's no coming back from it? This is a story about Springfield, Missouri, about a little pink house built on deception, and about the price that had to be paid for freedom. In 2008, Habitat for Humanity volunteers finished building a small house on the northern edge of Springfield, Missouri. The house is designed for two, a single mother and her severely ill daughter. A wheelchair ramp at the entrance, widened doorways, a special bathroom, lowered light switches. Everything is thought out for someone in a wheelchair. The mother's name is Claudine, but everyone knows her as Dee Dee Blanchard. She's 41 years old, a former nurse's aide from Louisiana. The daughter is Gypsy Rose, thin, with a shaved head, in a wheelchair, with an oxygen tube and a gastrostomy tube for feeding. Dee Dee tells the neighbors a long list of diagnoses: leukemia, muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, vision, and hearing impairments. Springfield welcomes this family with open arms. Local organizations pay for a trip to Disney World. The Make-A-Wish Foundation arranges a meeting between Gypsy and country singer Miranda Lambert. Lambert and her husband Blake Shelton donate $3,500 toward treatment. Cash donations pour in from churches, charity groups, and private individuals. To everyone around her, Dee Dee is the embodiment of maternal heroism, a woman who survived Hurricane Katrina and is now raising a severely ill child all on her own. Neighbors watch her push her daughter's wheelchair down the ramp every day, taking her to yet another doctor, carefully adjusting the oxygen tube. Nobody in Springfield even suspects that not a single one of Gypsy's diagnoses is real, that the girl in the wheelchair can walk, that the shaved head is not a side effect of chemotherapy, and that the selfless mother is actually a jailer. To understand how this jailer came to be, you have to go back 2 decades to the small town of Chackabay in southern Louisiana. Here, on the 3rd of May, 1967, Claudine Peter is born, the future D-Day Blanchard. The family is of French-Canadian descent, not wealthy, with complicated relationships behind closed doors. According to relatives, little Claudine was her mother's undeniable favorite. Gypsy's uncle, Evans Petra, would later say that his sister enjoyed playing the little princess and always craved other people's attention. Dee Dee herself was diagnosed with a heart defect in her youth, and her mother shielded her from many things. This may be exactly where the pattern took root, the one Dee Dee would later replicate with her own daughter. But attention wasn't the only thing Claudine wanted. The family would later accuse her of theft, credit card fraud, and forging checks. Stepmother Laura Peter claimed that Dee Dee mixed the herbicide Roundup into her food. Laura spent 9 months bedridden, and her condition only improved after Dee Dee moved out. The accusations were never legally proven, but the family was convinced. Relatives also claimed that Dee Dee restricted the diet of her own mother, Emma. At 23, Dee Dee met 17-year-old Rod Blanchard at a bowling alley bar. They married in December of 1990. Rod would later admit that he got married for the wrong reasons. The couple separated before their daughter was even born. On the 27th of July, 1991, Gypsy Rose Blanchard came into the world, a perfectly healthy baby. Rod dutifully paid child support, but Dee Dee gradually pushed him out of their daughter's life, step by step. Meanwhile, she got a job as a nurse's aide and gained access to the medical world, prescription pads, and an insider's understanding of how the healthcare system works. Dee Dee put that knowledge to use almost immediately. When Gypsy was 2 or 3 years old, her mother told doctors for the first time that her daughter suffered from sleep apnea. The diagnosis wasn't confirmed, but that didn't stop Dee Dee. With each passing year, the list of illnesses she attributed to Gypsy grew longer, from apnea to cancer, from neurological disorders to chromosomal abnormalities. Over 2 decades, Dee Dee took her daughter to more than 100 different doctors. The tactic was simple and foolproof. If a specialist started asking uncomfortable questions or doubted a diagnosis, Dee Dee simply found another one. No single doctor ever saw the full picture. Each one saw only their own piece. The result was roughly 30 unnecessary medical procedures, every one of which left real marks on the body of a healthy girl. Surgeons operated on her eyes, her legs, her throat. Dee Dee managed to get her salivary glands removed, and without them, Gypsy's teeth began to decay. The damaged teeth were eventually pulled. Gypsy received a gastrostomy tube for feeding, even though she was perfectly capable of eating on her own. Dee Dee regularly shaved her daughter's head, explaining that the medications would cause hair loss anyway. Gypsy got around in a wheelchair, even though her legs were fully functional. The control didn't stop at medicine. Dee Dee sat beside her at every appointment and squeezed Gypsy's hand, a signal that meant, "Be quiet." Gypsy never left the house without her mother. According to Christy, Rod Blanchard's second wife, Dee Dee stole prescription pads from the hospital where she worked and used them to obtain drugs that induced real symptoms in her daughter. A healthy girl was living in a body her mother was systematically destroying. This system of destruction ran for more than 10 years and could have continued even longer if not for the 29th of August, 2005. That day, Hurricane Katrina slammed into the Louisiana coast. The storm destroyed the Blanchards' home, and thousands of families lost everything. But for Dee Dee, the disaster became something more than a loss. It became the perfect cover. Along with the house, all of Gypsy's medical records vanished. Dozens of doctor visits, test results, surgical reports. None of it existed anymore. Dee Dee presented herself as a hurricane victim and received government assistance for relocation. Mother and daughter moved to Missouri, first living in a rental home in the small town of Aurora, then settling in Springfield. The story of a single mother with a severely ill daughter fleeing a natural disaster instantly drew sympathy. Local newspapers wrote about them. Church communities collected money. Dee Dee stopped working. Now the family lived on donations, government benefits, and charity grants. When new doctors in Missouri asked to see Gypsy's medical history, Dee Dee threw up her hands. The hurricane took everything. No specialist could verify whether the diagnoses had ever actually existed. Dee Dee didn't need to prove anything. All she had to do was claim it. And the doctors believed her. In a new state, with new specialists and zero documentation, Dee Dee got what you might call a clean slate. Hurricane Katrina didn't create the deception. It had existed long before the storm. But the hurricane destroyed the only thing that might have exposed it, the paper trail. But even without the paper trail, Dee Dee couldn't control everything. In 2010, Gypsy stumbled upon a document at home that shattered her understanding of reality, her own birth certificate. The paper listed a date, the 27th of July, 1991. Gypsy was stunned. All those years, her mother had told her she was born in 95. Gypsy thought she was 15. She was actually 19, 4 stolen years. When Gypsy asked her mother about the discrepancy, Dee Dee answered without blinking. Typo? But Gypsy checked her Medicaid card, and it also said 1991. It would later emerge that Dee Dee had forged a copy of the birth certificate, changing the year to 1995. She had even forbidden Gypsy's father Rod from wishing Gypsy a happy 18th birthday, because their daughter thinks she's 14. For the first time, the full scope of the deception became visible to Gypsy herself. If her mother had lied about her age, what else was she lying about? The illnesses, the diagnoses, the wheelchair? Questions multiplied, but Gypsy didn't dare ask them out loud. Instead, she started acting quietly. When Dee Dee wasn't looking, Gypsy secretly went online. She created a hidden Facebook account under the name Emma Rose. Through it, she chatted with a neighbor about ordinary things, and for the first time in her life, she had conversations her mother didn't control. The wall that had enclosed Gypsy's entire conscious life developed its first crack. Still barely noticeable, for now. A few months later, that crack became a chasm. In February of 2011, Gypsy made her first real escape attempt. At a science fiction convention, she secretly met a man named Dan, whom she had found online. They went to a hotel room. For the first time, Gypsy found herself alone, without her mother, without the wheelchair, without any control. The freedom lasted a few hours. Dee Dee tracked down her daughter and brought her home. What happened next, in Gypsy's own words, went beyond punishment. Dee Dee took a hammer and smashed the computer and the cell phone right in front of her daughter, the only 2 windows to the outside world. Then she handcuffed Gypsy to the bed. She threatened to break her fingers if she ever tried to run again. According to Gypsy, her mother withheld food for 2 weeks. But the most devastating blow wasn't physical. Dee Dee informed her daughter that she had filed legal documents declaring her incompetent. And this was no bluff. Dee Dee had indeed obtained a legal ruling of incompetency for Gypsy and had become her official guardian. This means, the mother said, that the police won't believe a word you say. Even if Gypsy made it to a police station, she'd be sent back home. For a girl who grew up in total isolation, with no education, no life experience, and not a single adult ally, those words sounded like a death sentence. Gypsy believed her mother. 4 months later, in June of 2011, she made a second attempt, this time a more desperate one. Gypsy found a BB gun and shot at her mother, thinking it was a real weapon. The attempt failed. Dee Dee tightened her grip even further. Escape was impossible. The police were not an option. Physical resistance was pointless. But Gypsy didn't give up. When Dee Dee bought herself a new smartphone, Gypsy secretly used it at night, the only thread still connecting her to the world beyond those walls. On the other end of that thread was a computer screen in the small town of Big Bend, Wisconsin. In October of 2012, Gypsy created a profile on a Christian dating site. She didn't list her real age or the fact that her mother believed her to be confined to a wheelchair. One of the first people to respond was Nicholas Godejohn, a young man of 23. Godejohn had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, level 1, back in elementary school. His IQ was 82. Specialists classified it as below average. He lived with his mother and had virtually no social connections outside the internet. Gypsy and Godejohn began exchanging messages. The correspondence quickly grew into video chats, and then into what both of them called a relationship. For more than 2 years, they kept in touch secretly, behind Dee Dee's back. For Gypsy, it was more than romance. He was the only person she told the truth. She wasn't sick, her mother was holding her captive, she had tried to escape, and she had been punished for it. Godejohn listened. In early 2015, he traveled to Springfield for the first time. Gypsy and Nicholas staged a chance encounter at a local movie theater so that Dee Dee would see him as a stranger rather than her daughter's internet boyfriend. Dee Dee was furious. She forbade Gypsy from seeing the man. The door slammed shut once more. Gypsy found herself at a crossroads. She considered various options, including getting pregnant by Godejohn, hoping her mother would accept him once she learned about the baby. But through their messages, the couple arrived at a different solution. They discussed the details: a knife, gloves, duct tape, the time when Dee Dee would be asleep. Gypsy stole money from the house and sent it to Godejohn for a bus ticket back to Springfield. This time, Nicholas wasn't coming for a visit. Godejohn arrived in Springfield in early June of 2015. He waited nearby while Gypsy and Dee Dee went about their daily life, to the extent their life could even be called normal. During the day, mother and daughter went to the hospital. Gypsy had her gastrostomy tube replaced again, the very tube she didn't need. On the way back, they stopped at a store. That evening at home, Dee Dee and Gypsy painted each other's nails. They had argued recently, but now they seemed to have made up. An ordinary, quiet evening between mother and daughter. Before going to sleep, Dee Dee turned to Gypsy and said a line that would later become one of the most quoted details of this case. "Don't hurt me." Dee Dee fell asleep. On the night of June 10th, Gypsy waited until her mother's breathing grew steady. Then she stood up, on those very legs her mother claimed didn't work, and walked to the front door. She unlocked it and let Nicholas Godejohn inside. Gypsy handed him a knife, rubber gloves, and duct tape. Then she went to the bathroom and locked the door. She covered her ears with her hands. Godejohn entered Dee Dee's bedroom. He stabbed the sleeping woman 17 times in the back. Dee Dee Blanchard died at the age of 48 in the very house a charity had built for her. Afterward, Gypsy and Godejohn packed their things, took money from the house, and left Springfield. They boarded a bus heading north to Wisconsin. While the bus carried them across 5 states, the house in Springfield sat quiet and locked. Dee Dee's body lay face down on the bed. One day passed, then another, then a third. On June 14th, 4 days after that night, a post appeared on the D. Gyp Blanchard Facebook page. The text was typed in all caps. "That beach is dead." Friends and neighbors of the Blanchards saw the message and couldn't make sense of it. Some assumed the account had been hacked. Someone commented, "This isn't funny, delete it." But then a second post appeared, this one containing a threat. Neighbors began calling each other. Ty Wolf, who lived nearby, walked over to the Blanchard house. The doors were locked. Dee Dee's car sat in the driveway, but nobody answered the knocking. Wolf called the sheriff. Police arrived and entered the house. On the bed in the bedroom lay the body of Dee Dee Blanchard, covered in stab wounds. Investigators determined she had died several days earlier. The first theory was kidnapping. Police searched for Gypsy, a severely ill girl in a wheelchair who obviously couldn't have left on her own. But then tech specialists traced the IP address of the Facebook post. It led not to Springfield, not to Missouri, but to the small town of Big Bend, Wisconsin. On June 15th, police pulled up to the home of Nicholas Godejohn. He surrendered without resistance. Standing beside him was Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She was standing, on her own 2 feet. No wheelchair, no oxygen tube, no shaved head. The officers looked at her and realized the case they were investigating was far more complicated than it had seemed. And it truly turned out to be more complicated. Both suspects gave full confessions within the first few hours. Gypsy said she was the one who had planned it. Godejohn confirmed that he had delivered the blows. But the investigation quickly understood. Behind this crime lay not just a domestic conflict, but more than 20 years of systematic deception. Doctors called in for expert evaluation confirmed that Gypsy did not have, and had never had, any of the claimed conditions. No leukemia, no muscular dystrophy, no epilepsy. She could see, hear, walk, and eat regular food. Everything Springfield had known about the Blanchard family turned out to be a lie. Investigators began examining not just the circumstances of the crime, but the entire architecture of the deception. It emerged that Didi's behavior fit the profile of a disorder formerly known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, in which a caregiver deliberately fabricates or induces illness in a dependent for the sake of sympathy, attention, and resources. Over 20 years, Didi had taken her daughter to dozens of specialists. Not one of them saw the full picture. Not a single social service agency intervened. Not a single charity that had donated money verified the diagnoses. The healthcare system, social services, and the charitable sector, all three lines of defense, missed a deception that lasted more than 2 decades. Didi made sure of that. She switched doctors at the first hint of suspicion, and the loss of the medical record stripped the system of its only tool for verification. The question all of America was now asking was a blunt one. How was any of this even possible? That question hung over the courtroom as the case reached the sentencing phase. But the law doesn't answer moral questions. It answers legal ones. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was initially charged with first-degree murder. If convicted, she faced life in prison. Her attorney requested Gypsy's medical records from Louisiana, the very records everyone assumed the hurricane had destroyed. Some of those records, stored in electronic databases, had survived, and they confirmed the full scope of what had been done to Gypsy throughout her entire upbringing. In July of 2016, Gypsy accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The sentence was 10 years in prison. At the hearing, Gypsy said something that stayed with everyone in the room. She called the sentence fair and added that for the first time in her life, she felt freer than she had when she lived at home with her mother. Nicholas Godejohn's trial began in November of 2018. His defense rested on a medical diagnosis: autism spectrum disorder, an IQ of 82, diminished capacity for deliberate decision-making. Psychologist Kent Franks testified that a person with such a disorder would find it difficult to deliberate about serious consequences. The prosecution objected. Godejohn knew what he was doing, volunteered to carry out the plan, and delivered the blows himself. The jury sided with the prosecution. Verdict: first-degree murder. The sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 25 years for armed criminal action. 10 years for the planner, life for the one who carried it out. That disparity became one of the most debated moral dilemmas in American criminal justice. A dilemma with no comfortable answer, but one that has a sequel. On the 28th of December, 2023, Gypsy Rose Blanchard was released from prison on parole. She had served roughly 85% of her sentence. She was 32 years old. More than half her life had been spent in confinement, first in her mother's house, then in a prison cell. Her release became one of the top news stories of the day. Cameras greeted her at the gates of the correctional facility. Interviews followed on Good Morning America, CNN, and The View. A few years earlier, in 2019, while Gypsy was still behind bars, the streaming platform Hulu had released the series The Act. Patricia Arquette played Didi and won an Emmy for the role. After Gypsy's release, the Lifetime Network produced the documentary series The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and a reality show about her life as a free woman. The Blanchard case entered popular culture as one of the most well-known instances of a disorder in which a caregiver fabricates illness in a dependent. It sparked discussions that went far beyond the field of criminal justice. Where is the line between victim and criminal when a person has spent their entire life in captivity? Why did more than 100 doctors who saw Gypsy over 20 years fail to recognize the deception? Why did not a single social service agency step in? And why was the only way out of that captivity for Gypsy the very thing that put her behind bars? Nicholas Godejohn remains in prison for life. His appeals have been denied. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is free, but the story that led her to that freedom doesn't fit into any simple formula.